was, and I thought it was interesting, but it seemed limited. It was very settler oriented, and so I was concerned about that. And then I had, and I wondered if we could have like a definition from like the Coast Salish people or something like that. But this, it was going to be this simple definition, and we didn't want to go on beyond that. But I was still curious what that would mean to someone whose ancestors had lived here for forever. What would that mean to them? So I was at a weaving, and my weaving and dye teacher was talking, and she was teaching the Coast Salish ways, and she talked about how her elders had taught her that plants are teachers. And I was fascinated by that. I didn't quite know what it meant. And then one day at Ion Nature training, Elise described how the trees that she was looking at, how they were teachers. And this was something that she had learned. So that is where Elise will take us tonight, and hopefully even broader beyond that. So I think you'll enjoy this opportunity to get another view, another take on the plants that we enjoy and love. So Elise, are you there yet?
I'm here.
I heard say, oh, yay, okay. I'm just in the blind on all this. So I welcome you both, you and Sable both, and I'll let you guys start from there, and definitely talk about any other parts of your that were in your bio that you want to bring out, and we'll look forward to hearing about the trees.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciate you inviting us, and Washington Native Plant Society South Sound chapter. It's such an honor to be here and to talk about plants, our teachers and precious friends, and trees in particular. So my name is Elise Crone, and I'm an herbalist and a wild foods educator, and live in Olympia, Washington, and I'm joining you from Baltimore tonight. So I'm 3 hours ahead of you. And it looks like February here. The trees, the deciduous trees have not come out, and the very, very first spring flowers are coming out. And I hear that there's potential snow in Olympia tonight. So wild weather, but a favorite time of year for us plant people. And thank you everyone who's joining us tonight. And I work at Grub, Garden Raised Bounty in Olympia, and we do many things. We work with youth and elders and veterans and tribal communities. And Sable and I are representing a team of people as one of Grub's programs in partnership with Squaxin Island Tribe's Northwest Indian Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center and Seattle Indian Health Board. And this is a project that we started several years ago called Plant Teachings for Growing Social-Emotional Skills. And it really is about how plants are our teachers, and how can we listen to them, how can we learn from them, and how can we translate these teachings to the next generation. I've been really, really lucky to study with tribal elders in Coast Salish territory, and we're going to lift some of them up tonight. And we often hear them say that plants are our teachers. And what does that mean? How do we learn from plants? How can we be with plants and have that relationship of reciprocity where we're receiving their gifts and also giving back to them? So we're going to really focus on a few trees in Western Washington tonight. And I will pass it on to Sable to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Sable. Welcome. I'm really grateful to be here tonight with you all and to be talking about tree teachings. And it's so exciting that there's 67 of you. This is the biggest presentation I've ever given. So thank you for that. And I am by training, and I'm currently practicing as a mental health counselor, but I also really love learning with, working with, and teaching about plants. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about how that began. It was actually in a presentation that Elise gave about wild foods and medicines, and she was talking about dandelion. And I'd always thought of dandelion as a weed. And here she was telling me that it could be something beneficial for our bodies and for the land. And also this teaching about something that you would assume is useless is actually very beneficial. And so that really caught me. And ever since then, I've been really just growing my interest in plants. And I'm very passionate about connecting people with nature as a way to support individual and collective healing. So I really appreciate you all being here and learning this way.
Thanks, Sable. And we'll show you in the next slide, this project, the plant teachings for growing social emotional skills. The next slide has some of our team members. And Deb, you're sharing our slideshow, is that correct? Great.
Yes, and I advanced it. Do you see that second slide?
Wonderful. Yep.
Okay, good.
So these are some of the people in our team. Shanoa Igawa, who's definitely a plant person and has really focused on movement. This project was co-designed with staff from Northwest Indian Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center, which is a 45-day inpatient program. And they've been using plants for a very long time as to connect patients with culture and traditions and the land and healing. So there are healing gardens at the treatment center. Native foods are incorporated into regular meals and into the pharmacy. So Kia down on the left bottom is the traditional plants educator, and June O'Brien was the director for over 18 years. In the middle toward the right, and then Ophi is the current director. And Shanoa on the right-hand side really brings in medicine around movement and plants, because when we are looking for healing and really looking for not only just healing our physical bodies, I come from being an herbalist, and I really have focused a lot of my attention in my adult life around how to heal through plants. And it's taken me many years to really understand how plants can heal our social emotional health. And so Sable, as a counselor, has brought a big piece of that in, as well as Rachel Smart on the bottom, who's Port Gamble and a counselor. How do we heal ourselves through plants? How do we learn to be in healthy relationships, to pay attention to our inner world, to be mindful, and to deal with high stress situations? And I really believe that plants can do that. And so we have a team of people who put together this resource. And the next slide shows you a little bit of what that is. It's a book and some cards, and the cards on the front talk about a social emotional skill that the plants teach us. So those of you, we're talking about prairies. Prairie Appreciation Day is coming up. And when we think about Gary Oak, one of the things many of you will think about is patience, because oaks grow so slowly. They send their roots really deep into the soil. They make thick bark and really hard wood, and they have that that ability to look ahead and to have patience. And what can patience, how can that help us in our lives? How can we breathe into the moment and think about our long-term goals and be patient? So these cards highlight 22 plants in the Pacific Northwest and the skills around that particular plant or tree. And then I mentioned Shanoa with movement. We have 7 movement videos that go with the toolkit that are really calling out plant teachings and helping to bring those teachings into our body through yoga and qigong and breathing exercises. We also have an activity guide for teachers, and this has actually several schools have used it for their social emotional learning. So Muckleshoot Tribal School is one of our partners, and they've fully implemented this into a K-12 social emotional learning curriculum. And then you'll see licorice fern there, which grows on bigleaf maple and many other trees. And that's a poster, which is also called an infographic. So all of the plants in this toolkit have infographics just to remind us of that plant and its teachings. And I want to, in the next slide, lift up Bruce Miller, Subiai from the Skokomish Nation, who's one of my teachers and such an influential person has been in so many ways in the Pacific Northwest. And Bruce, there's a really beautiful film called The Teachings of the Tree People about his life and work. And one of the things that he shared with me as a story is that when he was a young man, he was standing on a hillside with one of his elders, and his elder said, "Bruce, when you look out from this hillside, what do you see?" And he said, "I see trees." And his elder said, "Yes, that is what your generation would say. And our generation says that we see many nations standing in harmony." And each of those trees in that forest that you see has a special gift. And that gift is to be honored and helps to uphold the entire community in the forest. So the alder might only live to be 100, 125 years. And it is the community builder and helps to create this pathway where other trees can grow because it rebuilds the soil. And the cedar tree that lives to be over 1,000 years offers so many gifts as well. But as human beings, it is not our place to judge one as more valuable than the other, because each of those trees in the forest has a gift. And together they contribute to that healthy community. So I really learned a lot from Bruce about trees as teachers and how each tree has a unique gift. And how can we learn from that? And there are so many ways, from how to relate with each other, to how to care for the earth, to how to have a good, respectful relationship with ourselves. So we're going to share about 4 trees tonight. And the next tree is alder. And I'll pass it to Sable for that.
Okay, thank you, Elise. So alder, as Elise said, is the community builder. And I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about it. You may know a lot, since probably a lot of you know about alder. It's a very common deciduous tree in the Pacific Northwest, and it grows to be about 100 feet tall. Sometimes, it's older end, and they live, like Elise said, up to 120 years old. And you can recognize alder leaves, alder by its leaves, which are serrated. It also has parallel veins within those leaves. And on young trees, it's got like a smooth silvery bark. And on older trees, more mature bark, it's mottled, and you've got lichen and some mosses on there too. The tree has woody brown female catkins. And also the male catkin is more like a long caterpillary shape that hangs and turns reddish. It's green and then turns reddish in spring. So alderwood traditionally is prized for salmon smoking. It's a very clean burning wood and non-crackling. One of the unusual things about alderwood, if you've ever peeled back the bark, is that it has a very deep orange-red color. And that bark is really powerful medicine, and also can be used as a dye. Medicinally, it's used to soothe inflammation and to heal infection, and also it can be really helpful with digestion. Its bitterness is really helpful with digestion in the liver. So, and the wood can also be used decoratively for masks, utensils, and instruments. It's not the hardest wood, so a little more delicate. Alder teaches us about being in community because one of the main things is that it's one of the first trees to show up in a disturbed area, and it's very efficient at healing damaged land. They're very fast growing. They grow up to 3 feet a year. and their roots partner with soil bacteria and fungus to fix nitrogen out of the soil, which is rare in Pacific Northwest soil. So this helps the soil become rich and fertile for other plants to take hold. Alders also drop their leaves continuously, not just in the fall. So their leaves contribute to a rich humus for the forest floor. Deer, elk, and moose eat alder twigs. Small birds eat the seeds. Beavers love to eat its bark and use its branches to build their dams. And alders also provide key shade around streams and wetlands for salmon and other organisms. Over time, they support the establishment of stable evergreen conifer forests, as Elise mentioned. They live for 100 or 120 years, but then they start to fall and the evergreens grow up, and that is how the forest succession works. So we've got a card for the questions that we developed as we observed alder. And I love questions. You're going to notice that there's these slides with the questions, because I like to just invite, even though I'm going to offer some answers or some ideas here, that we like to just sit in inquiry as part of the teaching. So
Sable, let's have Deb advance the slides.
Oh, okay.
The second slide for alder, Sable mentioned the Franky bacteria that are on the roots. And one more slide forward there. After that, you can see on the bottom left these nodes. And so when we're at grub and we're weeding in our alder forest, when you're digging under alder trees, you can actually see those nodes, which is an amazing thing. Such a great science experience for youth. And we didn't mention that there's another curriculum called Tend, Gather, and Grow. That's kind of a sister curriculum to the plant teachings. And that has a deeper dive into some of the science and medicine making and activities around the plant. So there's definitely an activity, like even a game around alder and these Franky bacteria and how they work across differences with the alder tree and really create that fertile ground. And then the next slide actually shows the Alder Die, and this is at the Evergreen Dye Studio that we peeled alder bark with the support of Yvonne Peterson from the Chehalis tribe. She taught us how to do this and just made the most beautiful dye out of alder bark. Then I believe the next slide, Sable is talking about the backside of the Alder Card and those questions.
Yes, so alder, I create fertile ground through partnering with fungi and bacteria in the soil. As I grow, I offer food, shelter, and a home where plants and animals can thrive in community. So I've taken some of these questions and just wanted to give examples of where we were going with these and hoping to inspire conversations for people. So the question, how can I support people who are different from myself? Well, I think that, this is a challenge right now, especially. And what I started to think about this and wondered, like, where am I seeing this happen? How am I doing this? And recently I've been interacting with a remote community in Washington. And they were telling me about how many different people during the pandemic have kind of shown up there. And it's really showing like the diversity there. There's, indigenous peoples who've been there for millennia. And then there's, the farmers who've been there for generations. Then there's folks who've moved in recently in their second homes. There's young people trying to carve out an off-grid existence. There's Olympic athletes in the area. And I just was like, wow, how is that working out? How are people getting along? It seems like there's so many different types. And, they said, when it comes down to it, if you need help, everyone helps each other and they coexist. Even if there's lots of different values, you know, if you're stuck in the snow or there's fire threatening your home, people are going to put down what they're doing and help you. And I just found that image and that, you know, idea really fascinating, and just want to keep knowing more. Like, how do they, what makes that work there? But that's an example that I wanted to give. And just feeling like it's so important in this time where there's so much more pressure and stress, that we come together, that this is a strength for us when it feels like there are no answers or there aren't resources to come together as community. What can I learn from our differences? I think this is a really tough one. I don't have an answer for you necessarily. What I can say is I think it's really hard right now that our first tendency is to go to being afraid, which is what our minds do. That's a natural thing for humans, is to be afraid of what we don't understand or don't know. And so my encouragement is to continue, and I try this myself, to be curious, to pause, to wonder about the differences. And maybe if there's something that can be helpful about it, is there some meeting in the middle, some combination? Not easy, especially not right now. How can I contribute to the health of my community? I'm also thinking about this differently right now in terms of sustainability. I think a lot of us are under-resourced or feeling that way. And so when I think about sustainability, I'm not just thinking about long-term in the community, but for each of us, how do we keep going? And so I was thinking around what interests us, what do we find rewarding and enjoyable? And I wanted to give a personal example. I love plants, I like growing food. So I help out at the food bank, and I do what I can to help with food security in our community. And I just want to encourage folks to think about what they enjoy. This last question here: how can I strengthen my relationships with plants, the land, and spiritual traditions? And what you're doing right now, you're learning about plants. And I also want to encourage people to continue to connect with their environment and to consider taking action to steward and protect the natural environment. And I feel like Olympia is a great place for that, to consider where we can get physically involved to help with our efforts that way, or financially, or even to change policy. And then finally, support of, to connect with spiritual traditions. I think there are a lot of spiritual traditions that have supported communities in finding stability over the millennia. And many spiritual traditions value that interweaving of community and the environment. So that's all for alder. We could move to the next slide of bigleaf maple. Thank you. So bigleaf maple, we have tied it to the social emotional teaching of willingness. So again, I'm going to talk a little bit about bigleaf maple and how you might recognize it and what it does in its environment and how it's inspiring this willingness. Bigleaf maple is another deciduous tree. It ranges from British Columbia to Southern California. It thrives in wet forests and open fields. It can grow up to 100 feet, 150 feet. It's a little bigger than alder and lives longer, through up to 300 years. The young trees have a smooth green bark, and the more mature bark will be furrowed and grayish. But a lot of bigleaf maples, just like you're seeing in this picture, well, let's go to the next slide. Oh, there's the flowers. Well, maybe go forward. One more and another. There we go. So, back one. So a lot of them look like this, where they're covered in what we call epiphytes, mosses, lichens, and that's licorice fern. So, they're often covered. That's how you might recognize them. They have large leaves that grow on opposite branches, and they have 5 tips like a hand. and they can grow up to a foot in diameter, really big leaves. The leaves are actually used sometimes in, or they were traditionally used in food preparation because they're so large, they could wrap things up. Their flowers bloom March to April, right before the leaves emerge. And if we want to go back, we can look a little more closely at the flowers. There we go, thank you. And right now is actually, they are out. If you have been looking around, they're really green, and I just, either edible, you can pick those, and they have a real sort of sweet flavor at this point, and they're tender, as are the leaf shoots. You can eat those as well. The longer you wait, the more sort of tough and less sweet they will be. And you can see here in these pictures the way that the flowers are each, individual. There's these little ones here. I don't know all the plant parts exactly, but they make a little nest, and they definitely feed the pollinators at this time of year. So and then there's another slide forward too, I think, that shows the fruits that turn into seeds. So go one more. I just wanted to, these are the fruits that come out of those flowers, and in the fall they will they'll break apart and then helicopter down. You've probably seen those. And just to say a little bit more about the flowers, they are edible. Again, you can put them in salads. You can, we have a fritter recipe, which we could share with you if you're interested. And yes, the wood, just going on to other parts of the tree, traditionally is prized also for salmon smoking, and it's also non-sparking and made into paddles used in housing construction, for implements and cradle boards. Medicinally, the Klallam people infuse the bark for sore throats and tuberculosis, and you can also tap the sap from maple trees as a tonic. And some people also make maple syrup. Obviously, it takes a lot of it. So big leaf maple teaches us about willingness in its hospitality toward other species. So looking at that image, if we go forward one more slide here, you can see all these epiphytes, and it's because its bark is so full of that sugary, watery sap that's full of calcium. It is an attractive home for numerous epiphytes. It's got one of the highest epiphyte loads of any Pacific Northwest tree, and it engages in what we call mutualism, or a symbiotic relationship with where all the organisms are benefiting. So in the spring, I already mentioned that, these budding flowers will feed the pollinators, bees and butterflies. In the fall, the birds will come and eat the seeds, and also small animals. And its falling leaves will feed the forest floor as they decompose. And also even dead big leaf maple rots very quickly and rapidly sends nutrients back into the forest and streams. It also provides habitat. It cools the streams with its shade for salmon. So there's a little bit of the facts about big leaf maple, and how describing how it interacts with its environment, and what inspired us to give it this teaching around to name that teaching willingness. But I would like to give you all an experience of being with the tree in a way. So we have a guided meditation I'd love to walk you through. So if you would, please just try to get comfortable in your seat, and I'm gonna walk you through this, guide you through, and you may need to wiggle around, move, but we're gonna focus first on posture. So just allowing yourself to think about your spine and like a tree, growing your back tall towards the sky, And then thinking about where your body, feet, legs, back might touch the chair or the ground, and just sending energy down into the earth. And if you'd like, you can close your eyes so that you can use your imagination and turn inward, or you can just soften your gaze downward. And begin to imagine that you are outside in the forest. And maybe you've seen some of these images. Just begin to imagine you're sitting with an old big leaf maple tree. It's firmly planted in the ground and it's reaching high into the forest canopy. All along the trunk and branches, you will see a variety of mosses, lichens, and ferns. And if you get up close, you might find insects living in the plants growing on the tree. You might see golden spring blossoms, which feed bees and other insects. You might see squirrels sprint up the trunk for safety and hop through the branches. You can hear birds singing and chirping down at you from the branches above. Big leaf maple is a reminder of willingness. Notice how it invites a community to grow on its trunk and branches, showing us how we can be with others in an open and generous way. We can also try on new experiences and perspectives with an open mind. Big leaf maple also teaches us to be willing to let go, as it releases little helicoptering seeds and then leaves in the autumn. These seeds and leaves blanket the forest floor. In the winter, the leaves decompose and release nutrients into the soil. This letting go process feeds the next growth of leaves and buds in the spring. So please take a final moment to acknowledge or send some gratitude to big leaf maple and all that it can teach us about being willing. You might find that you can become more willing in some situation in your life when you remember big leaf maple. So in a few moments, we'll be finishing this guided meditation. Whenever you're ready, opening your eyes and reconnecting with your surroundings. So just looking at the last slide that we have and the questions there. Thank you. So just quickly, related to the meditation, how can I let go and open to this situation is kind of getting at, is there a situation in your life that's challenging you? And could it be helpful to let go or be more open? Where is my body holding tension? This is bringing it right into the present moment, noticing that tension. And I'm willing to breathe and let go. This is an invitation to begin that process of opening and letting go, being willing. In what ways can I become more willing? You know, to ask ourselves this question and to sit in that and maybe wondering if that could be helpful for us in some way to move forward. So that's big leaf maple.
Thank you, Sable. I've been so hungry for big leaf maple, and just as I've been walking on trails in Olympia, with all the wind that we've had, just munching on those blossoms, and they're so delicious, so full of pollen, and we've been mixing them into our pancakes. Yeah, I've been really loving it. And that the way that they just light up the hillsides golden right now is a first sign of spring for me that I really appreciate and makes me feel hopeful. So we are going to move along to talk a bit about cottonwood. And Kathy, thanks for your message in the chat. And I'm not sure why you can't click on the links, but if you go to goodgrub.org, you'll see the Wild Foods and Medicines page. And we have free resources, like educational resources, and also there's a tab of free resources. So you can access videos for alder, bigleaf maple, and Douglas fir on our website. And we also have a Vimeo page that has all the movement activities that we mentioned with Shanoa Igawa. So cottonwood, many of you probably know cottonwood. Driving through the Nisqually Valley, the cottonwood trees are the tallest in the valley, and they're just starting to leaf out. So we're seeing that bright green, that's almost a brown green color. And they're one of the plants that I really notice in the springtime because the male trees have catkins that are reddish, like the alders. And the female trees, their flowers are tiny and green and almost look like immature grape, like bunches of grapes, which in June or July will turn into cottonwood seeds and fly like snow in summertime. So I really notice cottonwood in the wintertime because they are so tall and because they often grow along rivers and wetlands. And this is a picture actually on the Dungeness River up on the Straits, but they're everywhere, all over Western Washington and really Eastern Washington too. This is the black cottonwood that we're seeing here. And the next slide shows the buds when they're just ready to leaf out, when the leaves are ready to emerge. And this is a time where we harvest them for medicine. So cottonwood buds are one of my favorite medicines for inflammation and pain. And we infuse an oil out of the buds that just, to me, smells like home because I grew up on the Columbia River. And for me, the teachings around cottonwood are really about being able to dive deep and to find your wellspring. And this is something I really was able to articulate through working with June O'Brien, who is a poet and a writer and was the director at Northwest Indian Treatment Center for many years and is definitely a cottonwood person. And we spent a lot of time thinking about these plant teachings and knowing Coast Salish traditions, knowing the medicine of the plants and the ecology of the plants. And cottonwood is really special because it can root so deep into the earth and touch that water that it needs and can draw up into its trunk and into its branches to this massive height. You know, they just grow so tall. And really creates this ecosystem along rivers and wetlands where so many species can thrive. But that ability to root deep in a place that's often changing, you know, you think about a river and it could be flooded in the wintertime and very dry and sandy drought conditions in the summer. And the cottonwoods thrive there because they're so deeply rooted and because they tap into that source of water, which in many cultures around the world is associated with spirit, with your own internal wellspring, or, you know, what feeds you? Who are you and where do you come from? Who are your people? What are your traditions? What helps you to stay rooted? And so I think of those teachings when I think of cottonwood. And there's also this amazing thing that when you cut a cottonwood branch and you look at the inside of the branch, most of the time you'll see a 5-pointed star, like a perfect little 5-pointed star. And there's a Dakota story about how a star was really wanting to be near people, that the stars would fly down toward the earth at the nighttime, and this particular star really loved the sound of people being kind to each other in a village, talking to each other, laughing with each other. And that star eventually found a way to live inside the cottonwood tree in order to be close to that feeling, that sense of belonging and being rooted in community. And so even now, it's like you cut the cottonwood branches and you'll see that tiny little beautiful star in there. And the next slide is a picture actually of cottonwood oil. So in usually February, March, we look for cottonwood branches that have fallen down to the forest floor. And we're looking for those leaf buds that have so much resin in them. You look at them and it's like you can see the resin on the outside and it smells piney. It smells all its own. It's really the smell of cottonwood, which some of you might recognize as a first smell of springtime, because the bees will come and gather the cottonwood resin and they use that to make propolis, which helps to repel like parasites and diseases from their hives. It's like bee medicine. So you smell that and it's like, oh, some people will recognize the smell of bees, but it's also really good medicine for us. And it's very anti-inflammatory, really good for sore muscles, good for healing the skin. So we put it in a lot of our like trauma balm for sore muscles, sprains, strains. We put it in our creams and our lip balm, like chapped lips. It's one of the best things. And so we're gathering those buds and putting them in extra virgin olive oil and then just really gently heating them in a double boiler. And that smell of the cottonwood comes out and the resin will dissolve into the oil. And then you press that out and that becomes the cottonwood oil that you use either as a massage oil or you mix it with beeswax and turn it into lip balm or salve. So one of our favorite medicines in our Wild Foods and Medicines program, and I did put in the chat some of the links to the 10 Gather Grow curriculum and the plant teachings curriculum. Also, they have how to make cottonwood oil, if that's something that you're interested in. And the next slide is a picture of cottonwood leaf, and they're huge. You know, they get really, really big and they're dark green and shiny on the top, and then kind of a silvery color on the underside. And you can see someone holding those cottonwood seeds, which are so fluffy and fly like snow in summertime. And then on the right-hand side is the male cottonwood catkins, which are reddish. And then on the bottom are the female cottonwood flowers that are beginning to develop into these capsules, which will eventually become those fluffy white seeds when they open up. And the last slide here is our cottonwood, the backside of the card. Just thinking about how do you tap into your own source of who you are and where you come from. And to be able to really draw on that source when you are feeling afraid or alone or isolated, that we also have that wellspring inside of us. And what can you do in your life that helps you to feel rooted and grounded in those times that might be really challenging? So cottonwood, you know, these plants, each of these trees, it's like a lifetime to really learn them. Cottonwood was my favorite tree when I was a little girl, and I still feel like I will be learning about this tree for the rest of my life. All of the relationships of plants and animals and places and relationships to people historically, and the continued relationships and stories that come out of that, just being with cottonwood, that are so powerful. And for some people, that's a particular tree. You know, it's like you develop a relationship with a particular cottonwood tree, and that tree really stays with you, and you learn from it, and you're able to give back to that tree. So our last plant we're going to talk about just very briefly is willow. And willow, we have many types of willows in Western Washington. This is a picture of Pacific willow, and I know that because it's got the bright yellow color that we see in late winter and early spring as the new shoots are emerging from wetlands and the sides of rivers. And willow is classically flexible. Willow branches often are flexible, and willow also is flexible in the environment. So the next picture has some of the things that are made out of willow. It often grows also on rivers and wetlands, these places that are constantly changing. And willow is so good at adapting. It can be flooded, it can be in dry areas, it can break off a branch, like really release a branch into a river, and that floats down the river and lands in the mud. And it's got a natural rooting hormone where it can turn into a new willow tree. So willow has that incredible adaptability and flexibility in the environment. It's nature's aspirin. So it has salicylic acid in it, and that helps us with inflammation and pain. And it's used topically and internally as a medicine to help us when we're feeling not so flexible and needing that ability to bend or to alleviate that pain. Of course, it's made into baskets. And the next slide is a picture from Hands-On Children's Museum. My daughter loved this willow sculpture. It's no longer there, but it was there for many years. And this is yet another example of willow's flexibility. And then our last slide is really asking some of those questions that willow can be flexible and strong. You know, sometimes we think about, oh, if I'm flexible, it means I'm weak, and that there is strength in flexibility. And how do we embody that? How can we be less rigid and more flexible in our lives? And that this comes to the way that we think, that we don't get stuck in ways of thinking, but that we can open ourselves to our emotions, we can open ourselves to our logical thinking, and we can really find that internal wisdom that can be flexible and balanced. So willow, yeah, such a powerful teacher. And there's a really wonderful, like a 10-minute movement video with Shanoa Agawa about willow and flexibility that has some, some movement activities around helping us to keep flexible. So we'll go to our last slide here, which once again has our goodgrub.org. If you're interested in learning more from the plant teachings curriculum, there's the book and cards, which are available on our Grub store and also at Chatwin Books. So if you go to chatwinbooks.com, the book and cards are there. And in about 2 weeks, we're launching a new curriculum portal that will have the 10 Gather Grow curriculum and the plant teachings curriculum, along with several others related to plants. So check that in a couple weeks, Native Plants and Foods. I think it's Native Plants and Foods curriculum portal. And I'll put that in chat as well. Just to learn more resources. And we wanted to open it up for our last couple of minutes here for questions or comments. And you're also welcome to put those in the chat. So we can stop screen sharing so that we can see people, and want to ask you just what questions do you have about these trees? And you're welcome to, I think people can unmute themselves and ask questions.
Actually, no, because
Okay.
we're in a webinar, but they can enter your questions in the chat and we'll review them. And I'm gonna look back through the chat and see if I see any questions that came up before.
I don't see any questions yet. Thank you, Selena, for being here. And Melinda and Peggy, thanks for your comments. Janet. Yeah, we just want to thank you for joining us and being curious about plants. And we're so happy to share resources. So I'll also put my email in the chat if you want to learn more, if you're having a hard time accessing the resources that we shared in the chat, you are welcome to email me. It's just elise@goodgrub.org. And June, thank you for being with us and for all of your teachings. It's such an honor to have you here.
There's someone who, Megan, said she uses the curriculum with her preschoolers.
Wonderful.
Yeah, they really connect with it.
And June had a question about the fritters, and that's actually big leaf maple. So I'll share that again. The big leaf maple fritters, I believe, are on the big leaf maple 10 Gather Grow lesson. And you can actually pick the fritters. Right now, you want to get the ones that are younger, so the ones that are budding or just opening. And you can really, if you taste big leaf maple, you can taste the nectar in there, and they should be sweet. Once the little seeds start to come out, then they start to get more bitter. They get more tannins in them. So get them young, and you can either pull the individual flowers off the flowering head, like the cluster, or you can dip the whole thing in pancake batter. And just, do it exactly like you would pancakes. And they're so delicious. You can put maple syrup on top. It is really the prime time for big leaf maple fritters.
So someone in the chat, Nick, also works at Daybreak Star Preschool, was asking about the shoot seed names being alongside on the cards.
Yes, the cards are so small, we didn't have room for the loose shoot seed names, but on the posters, the infographics, we actually do have Northern loose shoot seed, Southern loose shoot seed, and Clallam from our partners. And those infographics will be available on the Native Plants and Foods curriculum portal. So feel free to email me if you want more resources for Daybreak Star, and I would be happy to email you some things too. And we worked with Tulalip and Muckleshoot around Northern and Southern loose shoot seed names. I don't see any other questions. Anybody else?
I was just going to share that been under a lot of stress lately. So I went out for a walk earlier today and went under the cottonwoods and just searched out all the buds and just kind of did an aromatherapy, just smelling that beautiful balsamy, cottonwood early spring buds. It was lovely. Good therapy.
I didn't get a chance to mention there's a school in Portland, Oregon, the Cottonwood School, which is it's a K-8 actually, civics and science school. And they've adopted the plant teachings curriculum, and they're starting with Cottonwood, of course, since they're the Cottonwood School and they're right on the Willamette River. And so the students have been doing all kinds of activities around Cottonwood, walking down to the river. They've seen lots of beaver action with the cottonwoods, and it's been really lovely to just have them develop that relationship with the cottonwood tree and learn more about it and more about their place and their history. And yes, Kevin, definitely the conifers. Hemlock is humility, cedar around generosity, and Douglas fir around being able to adapt. And the 10 Gather Grow curriculum, actually online for those of you who are teachers, there's a module in 10 Gather Grow called Tree Communities, and it really does focus on social emotional skills. So on that free resources page on goodgrub.org, the whole Tree Communities curriculum is there with a basic botanical key on evergreen trees. So you can find that there, and there's a career-connected learning around trees, so that highlights Native people and different careers related to trees as well. And we are actually expanding the curriculum, so we have a version that we're working on right now for Alaska, for Southeast and South Central Alaska, that should be ready sometime in June, coming soon. And we've had other regions adopting it. in the East Coast and the Southwest, and even in the Great Lakes area. So using it as a model. Gail, thank you for inviting us. It's really lovely to be here.
Yes, it's been a delight. I was just thinking, like, sometimes I think about maybe the gifts that I get from plants, but I don't take it to that next level deeper about what are they teaching me. So I really appreciated tonight's in-depth study of trees and their ability to teach us and to reflect on their qualities. Yes.
Thank you. And we got a question about, have we used this in therapy and healing of trauma? Yes, definitely. So the Northwest Indian Drug and Alcohol Treatment Center has fully implemented this for patients. And there's a version that really aligns with DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy. And then the Muckleshoot tribe and the Port Gamble tribe have adopted it. So it's being used by mental health counselors and domestic violence programs. Sable's using it in her counseling practice. So I think there are a lot of different ways that this can be utilized, from public schools to informal education to all different kinds of healing modalities. And they are, so June is asking, are the teachings available for individuals and not just schools or communities? And yes, anyone can get the book and cards. And so you can get those from Chatwin Books or from Grub if you're in Olympia. And we have kind of the expanded for educators that has an activity guide and the infographics. And that curriculum portal will not be launched for another couple of weeks. So soon the entire curriculum will be available. And for now, the plant and cards are available. And Chatwin Books is really fast too, though. You know, if you make an order, they'll get it to you within a day or two.
Well, Elise and Sable, I really appreciate you coming tonight and sharing. This has been just a delightful way to celebrate Washington's trees and the communities that have cared for them for so long and their learnings from them. And we'll, I'm going to save this chat. Oh, we got more questions coming in. Yay. It takes sometimes a while for us to get into the flow of the questions. So,
yeah, and Kathy, yes, you can learn more about behavioral health use, and I'm going to put my email in the chat again, and you can definitely email me. And Valerie, congratulations on your 34th anniversary. That is really wonderful. We're so happy to hear that. Well, thank you, everybody. Such an honor to be here with you all. And we hope spring is really, really wonderful and fills you with just hope and new teachings, that willingness to open ourselves to new ideas and new perspectives and new ways of being. I think the plants can really lead us in what we need right now in the world.
Thank you. I echo Elise.
Thank you both very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful night.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thanks.
So just to let you guys know, I'm going to be promoting you all to panelists so you can turn on your cameras and questions while Deb is sharing some of the announcements. I'll be doing that. So.
Kathy, do you have a question?
No, but thank you. This was wonderful.
Good.
And Denise, you can stop the recording now.